Motor Ron stuff. Today's episode is about a mower, a carburetor mower. This is a Black Max. That was the name of it, and it was built by Poulin or the other one, Husqvarna. I think they're the same, literally, and they had a model number on it. But anyway, it looks like this. And it had a Honda engine on it, and it's a 160. It's a Honda GCV160A, and I think the A stands for an automatic choke. So it looks like this. That's one picture of it. Here's another picture of it. This had to do with carburetor repair or replace. Okay, here's another picture close up of it. When you take the airbox off, what you see is three bolts that are holding everything in place. And the two at the bottom here, these two are goes directly through the body of the carburetor, and that one over there just holds this whole box to this frame piece over here. So these two at the bottom, I can get it right. These two at the bottom right here go straight to the carburetor, and they're fairly long bolts. So you take those three out and the carburetor is in loose. And I'm going to tell you a real secret on how to fix this thing and take the carburetor out. You absolutely positively have to drain the oil out of your mower. Get that out first, and hopefully you know how to do that. And then you turn this thing on its side. If you try to work on it in a normal laid out position, gravity is going to make it really hard for you because the carburetor weighs enough. It's always going to try to drop down. So you have all these gaskets and the carburetor and control rods and everything. And they're not going to stay in place for you if you don't turn the carburetor more on its side like this and take advantage of gravity so you can get that carburetor to set in there properly through all the gaskets and through the bolts that have to go through the very front of it. So that's drain the oil and then turn it on its side. And then you can remove those bolts out of the carburetor and that arm. And you can take that arm off. It only has one spring. It only has one spring down here somewhere. Oops, down here on the arm. And it's real easy. You take that whole metal arm off of there. Anyway, all right. So make sure you have it turned on its side. Absolutely. Otherwise, you're going to need four arms to be able to hold all those gaskets in place, the carburetor up, get the levers in the right position, and thread those bolts through the airbox, which now covers everything up. You can't see anything. This is the only way to do it. Take my word for it. Okay, so you've taken the bolts out, and the carburetor is still in there, and it still should be setting pretty much in position because you have it tilted up. It shouldn't have moved very much. Now, and what you have to do is I'm going to take the carburetor out, and because I had screwed up one of the linkages to it, and I won't go through that, but this is good for you want to take the carburetor out and clean it, or you want to replace it. Now, up at the top here on the carburetor, there are two a rod. It's a automatic throttle on this particular mower, and there is also a spring, and they both attach to the throttle control valve on the back of the carburetor. And you have to lift your carburetor up to get that rod out, and you need a pair of needle nose pliers to pull that spring out. Now, when I first took it apart, I was trying to do it with it setting like in a mow position, and the carburetor kept trying to fall on me, and I wound up uh, uh, screwing the spring up. If you see right here, right there, that big loop in it shouldn't be in there. I wound up stretching that string. So once more on how the throttle, and it's a automatic throttle adjustment. Up on this lever right over here, this is this lever right here is the automatic throttle. I'm gonna come down here and see if I can make this a little easier. This lever right here is the automatic throttle that gets moved back and forth. There is a spring at the bottom that hooked onto that clamp that you took off. But both the rod, which is a solid rod, and that spring connect over here. Obviously, one hole is bigger than the other. The big hole gets the rod. The small hole gets the spring. The spring does have to be around that rod. It cannot be separated. There's not enough room in there for proper play. So I put a new spring on, and it had to go threaded through the rod. Okay, so you make sure that that is still the case when you do this. Now, because I had taken the carburetor off and screwed up, anytime you take it off, the gaskets are any good anymore. So you have the issue of like, well, do I buy a gasket set? Which, how do you even find one for that particular model of a Honda engine, GCV160A, a carburetor gasket set? Or you buy a whole new carburetor, and you can buy a whole new carburetor for like 20 bucks. And it comes with all the seals, comes with a fuel cutoff switch, it comes with some fuel line hose. And that's what I initially did. I bought, this is the old carburetor right here. This is a new carburetor. They look close enough together, but you'll notice this one is shallower in the bottom. It doesn't have the big bowl down here that the old one did. And also will point out something you may did not know about. There is a screw right here that if you open it up, you can use that to bleed all of the gas out of the bowl, as well as if you have the fuel cutoff switch turned to on, you can totally bleed the fuel tank out this hole. Well, it's a great idea, except you can't hardly get anything underneath of the screw to catch the gas. You would need like a turkey baster pan or some kind of small aluminum pan to fit underneath there to collect it. It's a nice idea, but the implementation's wrong. And where the screw is will vary on how this bowl was attached to the bottom. And you can loosen up the screw on the bottom and rotate this bowl around if you wanted to move that screw into some other more better position. So I contemplated using a new carburetor over here versus the old one. And there was really nothing wrong with the old one, just the gasket. So I decided I would keep it. Both have the automatic throttle control on them. This one looked very similar. It could have worked. Okay, once you got the carburetor out and you've decided whether you're going to put a new one on or an old one on, you have the gasket issue. And with any kind of repair, the first thing you want to do is look up as much information as you can about the particular mower you have. If you have an owner's manual, that's great. But there'll be additional details you don't know about that won't be in that manual. Now, luckily, I found the mower for the actual Poulin uh, operator's manual, and it clearly said 8 ounces of 10W30 oil. That's the first time I saw that listed anywhere. And it is absolutely true. That's what that mower takes. It will show full on the dipstick gauge at 8 ounces of 10W30. Not 30 weight, 10W30. Anyway, you got the gaskets to deal with, and you need some sort of diagram like this to show you where the gaskets go. And it's kind of a puzzle because gaskets, some have a third hole in them besides the two for the the throttle body, the big long screws. And it's sort of a puzzle, and you might want to take a picture or a camera picture of how your current carburetor is mounted before you fully take it apart, okay? So you can see where the gaskets are, and some can be large and some can be smaller. Okay, so I have the gaskets and I need to put it all back together. But one of the things, and I showed you, once I put the throttle control rod through the throttle lever on the old carburetor, and I put the spring in it because it had it upside down. The gravity kept it pretty much setting right where it was supposed to go. So I didn't have any issue of like trying to bend. I didn't have the gravity issue of the carburetor kept trying to fall down because it fell right down where it belonged. And okay, so another secret issue that you must do is, because this one had an automatic choke on it, there is the automatic choke lever is this rod sticking out right here, and it must be pressed up against the black rod out of the choke, out of the body here. That must be pressed up against there. If you don't do that, and the first time I assembled it, didn't know anything about that. I didn't think about it. Wasn't told I needed to do that. The blower would not start basically because it wasn't being choked. I would engage the automatic choke, but this lever did not catch this arm. And when you do the automatic choke, which is up here, and you move it that way, it forces that choke to close. You have to have that in the correct position. Again, because you're turned upside down and gravity's helping you pull things and keep them in place, shouldn't be a problem. You can easily put that on there. Okay, so now I've been starting the gasket issue. And what I wanted to do was to find the right gaskets. I used the gaskets out of the new carburetor. And I used what's called, it's a kind of a pasty stuff called Formaseal. If you don't have gaskets, you can buy some material at an auto parts store that you can smear on any metal faces or any faces that need a gasket. You put it on there nice and heavy, and then by pushing them together, that will dry out and form a gasket. So I did the double. I used the real gasket, but I coated it with this Formaseal as well, and let it dry on some pieces so they would stay together, because again, putting this back together through the throttle, those bolts going through that throttle body up here, up, up there, all the way up to there. There's all kind of gaskets down here that have to be lined up with the head. Again, because you can see the engine is set over on the side, gravity will help you and keep it relatively lined up. Not perfectly, but relative. So I used a gasket sealer on where the head mounted to a standoff, and then there was another gasket, and I used that again. And I let it dry enough, and it was tacky enough that it stayed relatively in position. They didn't want to slide. So that helped me a lot, okay? And one of the things that I guess I should have showed you in the last picture is that I went ahead and put the bolts through right here. You see the bolt going through the carburetor. I put those bolts in to get initial alignment. Everything below here had proper gaskets in it and a sealant on it. And I lined this up so I knew it would at least be close to being correct, and had the choke lever in a correct position. And I'll let that set for a while just that way. And eventually I did add some spacers up here and tighten those bolts down to put some pressure on all that gasket sealant stuff. All right, so I got it all in place. But what I don't have is the air box back in place, and I don't have the metal arm right there. Here is the air box, and it obviously has a gasket on it. And this is the arm that that third bolt sets through. And the automatic throttle has a spring attached to this. So I had to deal with this issue. Okay, so what I did was, one thing about the airbox that I'll point out to you is that the holes in the airbox for the two at the bottom or go through the throttle, through the carburetor body, and the third one just screws into that metal frame. But those are just metal round. They do fit into a plastic holder, but they will come out. You move this throttle body around, and they'll just fall out. So I used some of my seal mega gasket to like stick them in there, so I didn't have to worry about them falling out during the whole assembly process. Because you turn it upside down, and they're going to fall out. I didn't want to do that. So this guy, and it has a seal on it as well. This guy is going to mate up against the carburetor face, and so I put my seal, the gaskets are already glued to the, well, or sealed to the airbox, and then I coated this side, and then I took the screws out of the carburetor body, put this down in place and tried to line up the holes, and then I started my two throttle body screws down in, and I had to move it slightly. I had to get alignment perfectly, but it wasn't much because again, gravity was working for you to keep it against the head, and the make a seal was kind of making it sticky or tacky. So you didn't have to move it much. You have to do it by feel and run your bolts down through the airbox, the two bolts that go through there. And I managed to do that. And once I got it all in there, I had my throttle body linkages at the top were proper, and I had the lever on the over here on the way over here on the automatic choke. And so I torqued these down, these two bolts, these two, you can't see them. The two bolts that went through the carburetor body, I torqued them down pretty tight. And I left it like that because I wanted that tacky make a seal to dry out, and with the pressure on it, it should have created a good air-free tight seal. Okay, so that's how I got it back together. Um, Use gravity, turn it on its side, make sure your spring isn't stretched. None of the springs are stretched. If so, you can buy a spring kit. It won't perfectly match what you have, but you can buy one. The other thing is make sure that automatic choke lever is against that automatic choke tab sticking up, and make sure all your gaskets against any metal uh, face is properly gasketed and maybe has some seal on it and so on. Okay, one final thing, and this is over and above all that. I do not like having gasoline in the carburetor bowl, which hopefully you know what a carburetor bowl is. I showed you one earlier when I had the carburetors. That I don't like gasoline left in that bowl when I store it over winter. And that's really not a problem because this particular machine came with a fuel cutoff switch that you could cut off the fuel to it and let it run till it drained that bowl out. And that's all fine and dandy. But now you have gasoline in your fuel tank, unless you ran it totally dry. And I don't like keeping gasoline in the fuel tank over storage either. And just to remind you what the bowls look like, the bowl is this piece. That's a bowl over here, and that's a bowl. And there's one screw at the bottom that goes up that screw right there holds it to the body. There's a screw at the bottom here that holds it to the body. You can take those out and empty out the bowl. It may have some sediment in it. There is a valve in here, which it's called a float valve, which when this bowl fills up, the float valve goes up and puts a stopper into the incoming fuel. That's how the fuel is regulated to the carburetor, is through this bowl. Okay, so I got it all back together, and I can do a cutoff switch that was built into it and run the fuel out of the bowl, or I could do the cutoff switch and open the bowl up at the bottom and let it all drain out. But I didn't have a good way to drain the tank, and I don't want to store it over winter with fuel in it. There's ethanol in fuel, and ethanol absorbs water like 80 times more than gasoline does. And because we're green and everything, we're using ethanol to stretch our gas. I don't like doing that. So my solution has been, and what I came up with, and this is, I bought, where is it? This guy. This is a Y, if you will. Here's my connection to my tank. It comes into this Y, and then I have a cutoff switch here and a cutoff switch here. This one goes to a hose, down here that I can drain my gas tank. The other one obviously is just a fuel cutoff to the carburetor in that bowl. So this lets me both drain the bowl and the fuel tank. Final thing on carburetors and small equipment. I don't know. I don't like ethanol, and I've had people say that ethanol ruined their small engines, especially ones where you mix oil and the gas together, like string trimmers and blowers and things like that. I have never had that problem, but I decided years ago to use high test gas, the highest octane gas you can get, which I think is 93 octane, in my power equipment, and hopes that that would somehow help the ethanol issue. And I think it has, because I've never really had a problem with any of my mixed oil and gas equipment, like blowers and weed eaters and things like that. Anything, chainsaws, anything where you have to mix oil and gas together. So I suggest to you, well, you say, premium gas like $5 a gallon. But you don't use that many gallons. I have a 5-gallon can I use for all my lawn equipment. I may have to fill it up once every 2 years or something. Not very often. You don't use a lot of gas in power equipment. Anyway, I use a high octane gas, 93. But I do for power equipment. I don't care what it is. If it's going to be stored for a long period of time, I drain that bowl and I drain the gas tank. So in the start of the new year, I have fresh gas in the whole system, and that eliminates a whole series of problems on hard starting. Have fresh gas. That's enough for today. What I was trying to show you was the old, you can do a carburetor replacement, or you can do just take it off and clean it all out, replace the fuel line. You can do all kinds of repairs. This is a picture of the bad boy again. This was called a Black Max. I've got the model number for it. There is one in the back. It says made by Poulin. It's got their model number and everything. But the real issue is the Honda engine. And I swear it had to have been made. That engine was assembled setting up like I told you you're going to have to do to get it back together, and use gravity as your friend to keep everything sort of aligned, because weight is going to push that carburetor down on the head for you. That's a key trick. The second is make sure you have that lever in the right position on your automatic choke. That's enough for today. Today is the 24th of March 2026. And by the way, I have finished this whole job, did the automatic choke, and the thing, I had to pull it like twice, and it started right up. It's running fine. And I decided to go ahead because I got a new plug with the new carburetor. I did replace the plug at the same time because I don't think it ever had. that's enough for today. Hopefully this will help you. The key, if you have one of these things, you can look at other videos on how they do it. The key is to turn it on its side. Drain the oil, turn it on its side, use gravity as your friend to keep all those gaskets and that carburetor in line with the head. And then you'll have to slowly put the screws in and find a perfect alignment. One last thing is there's a rubber hose that comes out of the airbox and goes over and collects some gas out of the cylinder that blows past the rings. Uh, Put that on the airbox first and make sure it's kind of lined up with the hole in the engine, and then put that rubber hose in the engine. You will not be able to do it the other way around. If you leave that hose connected to the engine, you won't have enough space to get your fingers in up or underneath the carburetor and that airbox to get that hose on. So put the hose on the airbox first and then into the engine. Hope that takes care of all the tricks and hanging on with this bit, honk around stuff. I hope it helps.